Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
I've been promised bail, ladies and gentlemen. This is John Chancellor, somewhere in custody.
We wouldn't have to have Gestapo tactics in the streets of Chicago.
A long, dark night for America is about.
We haven't seen a contest that tight for a Republican nomination since 1952.
My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president.
Reagan, and then he's added Ford. Do they have a deal?
Read my lips.
I still believe in a place called hope.
I accept your nomination.
I proudly accept your nomination.
I accept the nomination of the Democratic Party.
Picking our presidents, the greatest moments, with Chris Matthews and Tom Brokaw.
Every 4 years, the Democrats and the Republicans meet to shine a spotlight on their best and brightest. It's where leaders pump up and excite their base of supporters and try to turn sympathetic observers into active voters. In this program, we'll look at the greatest moments from America's political conventions and how they affected us. We'll also focus on the inside stories, how battles were won and lost, and how heroes were made. Here to help us is the journalist who has for 4 decades guided us through the personal, the political, the commotion, and sometimes chaos of the national conventions. NBC News anchor Tom Brokaw. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Chris.
Tom has served as anchor, reporter, teacher, historian, and even humorist.
The ERA, as you know, it is one of the emotional issues in American politics these days.
An historic moment, the first time that a woman has been the vice presidential candidate on a major party ticket.
It is as crowded a situation as I have ever seen the president in. Thank you very much, Senator Robert Dole of Kansas, who is convinced that if the deal has been struck, it has not been announced. He says we ought not to get too carried away here. One of the younger members of the Republican Party. I think that we've now found the camera, Bill. Billy Munger, who is the chairman of the Mississippi delegation. Do we see him there?
I guess it reminds me of a car that starts off on a very smooth trip, well planned, everything is going well, and last night it hit a patch of ice. Of course, this is like spring training. It's every baseball or political manager at this part of the season said, we've got a crack at the World Series this fall. And they finally got it back under control, and they're back on the road again.
Kind of like a favorite coach after a long, long winning streak.
And we don't think that there was any damage to the structure of the car.
Welcome to the Love Boat, the GOP National Convention with its skipper, George W. Bush.
How do you like that for a metaphor, Patrick?
That's all right. And finally, the feeling here that I've had in the hall, that you could go up to a delegate, most of them at any rate, hit them in the face with a cream pie, set their suit afire, cut off their credit, make threats on their children. And they'd look at you and say, I may not like it, but in the interest of party unity, I'm not going to say anything.
Tom, how do you deal with the noise level out there? Because it seems to me that would be the hardest thing.
Well, it's part of the adrenaline pump, frankly. You get down there, and it's at fever pitch. And it's not so true anymore as it once was when real issues were being settled on the floor, and the outcome every night was always in doubt. And you had to race around from delegation to delegation, from source to source to find out what was going on. It was the best job I ever had. I really grew up wanting to be a floor correspondent at a national convention, having been raised in the days of Huntley and Brinkley and Walter Cronkite, and watching all those conventions unfold on television. And when I got there, it fulfilled all my expectations.
The conventions are stages for great performances and commanding speeches by sometimes charismatic leaders, a chance for the two parties to deliver their calls to action. No candidates have done this better than Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy. Let's look first at the Kennedy mystique, which has possessed every Democratic convention since he lost his fight for the vice presidential nomination back in 1956.
We stand today on the edge of a new frontier, the frontier of the 1960s, the frontier of unknown opportunities and perils.
When I think of President Kennedy, I think of what Shakespeare said in Romeo and Juliet, when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he shall make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun.
The work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives,
and the dream shall never die.
So many of you came into public service because of him. In a very real sense, because of you, he is with us still.
My brothers had every gift but length of years. The years have been left to us to use them with all the inevitable setbacks to accomplish the works of peace and justice.
The new frontier was not a place in time, but a timeless call.
Tom, you have to go back to that old-time television we're looking at right there to remember, if you can, what it was like before the Kennedys.
Yes, you know, my earliest memories of conventions are when I was a kid, a child really out in South Dakota, and was very interested in politics at an early age, in large part because my parents and grandparents were followed, as I think a lot of people in the Midwest did in those days, what was going on with national conventions, what was going on with politics. Kefauver came campaigning through South Dakota. They were madly for Adley in our family. But I remember seeing the convention highlights in the Movie Tone News at the end of the week, Chris, in the movie theater, and then in '56 began to see it on television, and in '60 began to see it with John Kennedy in Los Angeles. I was so struck watching all of that, the Kennedys and the presence that they've had, and some very personal memories came back. John F. Kennedy Jr. came up to the NBC booth after he made his speech because we gave him sanctuary up there. He could kind of keep track of what was going on the floor. And immediately his cousins were all over him because he began his speech by saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." He must have said it 22 times trying to quiet the crowd, and everybody had told him that that's what he should do, but they gave him no end of grief about it. And when Bobby Kennedy appeared in Atlantic City after his brother had been killed, that was 12 minutes of a standing ovation for him. Those were electrifying moments. We have too few of those now in Republican or Democratic conventions in which people get genuinely excited about what's going on, and you have that feeling that they're connected to their political process as they once were and are not as much anymore.
You know, I remember I had never heard of Kennedy before '56, and I remember we had just gotten our TV set, I think, and I remember catching, and I was sort of rooting for Kefauver because I'd heard of him. Right. And this guy, Kennedy, and I wasn't thinking Irish or anything. I just thought, who's this guy? And then he showed up with Jackie to concede the defeat to Kefauver for the vice presidency. And these people don't look like politicians. They look great.
I move that we suspend the rules and make the nomination of Estes Kefauver by acclamation.
And they had that staccato New England accent. They were handsome. They seemed to be a new generation of politicians, and that's when my attention was first drawn to them when I was still in junior high, I guess.
On the Republican side, the man whose legacy has been felt convention after convention is Ronald Reagan. His inspirational power took hold with his nomination back in 1980 and hasn't left.
The time is now, my fellow Americans, to recapture our destiny, to take it into our own hands. The choices this year are not just between two different personalities or between two political parties. They're between two different visions of the future. 8 years ago, we met at a time when America was in economic chaos, and today we meet in a time of economic promise. We met then in international distress, and today with global hope. May every dawn be a great new beginning for America, and every evening bring us closer to that shining city upon a hill.
Well, let me close with Ronnie's words, not mine. In that last speech 4 years ago, he said, "Whatever else history may say about me
when I'm gone, I hope it will record that I appealed to your best hopes, not your worst fears, to your confidence rather than your doubts."
Well, he